All right, so post low back spasm phase 1, this is going to be 12 exercises. If any of these exercises are too painful or bother you too much, move on to the next one. See if those are tolerable. Do as many of these as possible every day if you can, or at least every other day. If you start to get some relief during these by doing these exercises, I would say you could do them multiple times a day. I know at some points when I've had a back spasm, I would do these a couple times a day because it seemed like it made my low back relax so much more, and it just made the rest of my day much more tolerable to do whatever it is that I needed to do. These will also help be a fantastic way to repattern how you move and how you activate muscles through your body so that you stop using your low back so much with whatever it is that you're doing. The low back is never really the issue when it comes to a low back spasm. It's above and below that we really need to work on, so that's what this is going to focus on. Exercise 1 is going to be with the mini band. This mini band will be at or above my knees. You don't need a heavy band for this. I'm going to be laying on my side, and I'm going to make a pillow with my arm. My feet are stacked, my knees, hips, and shoulders are all right above each other. I'm not laid back or rolled forward. And from here, I'm going to keep my ribs down so that my core is somewhat engaged, mostly just to protect my low back so I'm not arching and activating and tensing those low back muscles. So ribs down. And from here, while everything is perfectly stacked, I'm just going to raise my heel and hold this hip abduction position for 1 minute. If my back starts to fire up and get too tense, I'm just going to lower this leg. I only want to have tension through the glute and nowhere else. So again, ribs down, rest your head, try and relax everything except for this glute, which is the only place we'll have tension, and make sure that low back and those spinal erectors and those low back muscles stay as relaxed as possible. Hold this for 1 minute. The next exercise we'll do is a mini band clam hold. So the starting position for this will be where the knees are at 90 degrees, the heels are directly below your hip joint, and your upper body is in the same position. So heel, hip, and shoulders are in a straight line, knees are at 90, making an arrow pointing directly away from our body. From this position, we're just going to create another pillow, keep our ribs down, make sure our low back stays relaxed, push my bottom leg into the ground to make sure I don't roll open, and then pull my top leg open just a little bit, again feeling the low back to make sure that I'm not tensing up through that area and I'm only getting tension through the glute. My feet stay together, and the only place I'm getting tension is right here through the side of the hip. You'll hold this for 1 minute on each side as well. The next exercise we have is just a core activation, which will bleed into the 4th exercise. So from a position where we could do a glute bridge out of, I'm going to get my feet hip width apart. I'm going to get some slight tension in this band. And then all I'm going to do while keeping my head relaxed and rested on the ground is bring my ribs down to engage my core and then relax my head back down. You'll feel you kind of want to do this and crunch up a little bit as you bring your ribs down, or at least I do. I'm going to do that and then just keep this position here and relax my head. You'll hold this core brace position for 1 minute. Exercise 4 is going to be this same position. The only thing we're going to change is while maintaining this connection by bringing our ribs down to our hips and hips pulled up to our ribs, is squeezing our glutes to bring our hips in the air without arching our back. So this is one where we're using a whole lot of low back, and then this is one where it's only glutes. Cool, so I'm not getting as high, that's totally fine. If I want to challenge that, I can try and squeeze my glutes as hard as I can to bring my hips up. But again, our goal is just to activate the glutes and get tension through glutes and let the low back relax as much as possible. You can still check your low back from this position. So again, ribs down, glutes engaged, so hips rise, and I can feel right underneath to make sure that my low back is staying relatively relaxed. If I need to, I can drop my hips a little bit and only lift my hips or butt like ½ inch to 1 inch off the ground, if that's all that is necessary to make sure that we get tension and activation through the glutes and keep the low back relaxed. You'll hold this position for 1 minute. All right, the next one that we have is called a quadruped position, which just means we're on our hands, knees, and toes. So from here, my hands are right below my shoulders, both knees are on the ground right below my hips, and both toes are on the ground with my toes rolled under my heels. From this position, I'm going to keep my ribs down, and I'm just going to rotate one knee out to the side. So hands stay in contact with the ground, opposite knee is still on the ground, both toes are on the ground. The only point of contact that is now lifted off is this knee of the leg that's working. You'll notice you kind of want to like rotate and open up. Try and keep that right hip, or whichever hip is working, close to the ground, and this knee is barely hovering above. And just rotating that leg out to the side so that our low back stays flat and we don't arch or rotate here. Cool, so again, from this position, rotate out as much as is needed. Most of my weight is on this hand and this knee, and I'm maintaining tension through this glute. I'm going to hold this position for 1 minute on each side. All right, so exercise 6, we're gonna be standing now. Band is in the same spot. My feet are staggered where my back foot, those toes are in line with my front foot's heel. From here, I'm going to get into about a quarter squat, keep my ribs down, lean forward just a little bit onto more of like the balls of my feet, or at least completely flat-footed. My back heel comes off the ground just a little bit, and from here, I rotate this leg out to the side without letting this leg come in. Cool, so for this one, it can be a little bit trickier to not have any tension through the low back. So try and feel which position feels the most relaxed through the low back. Even if you need to grab onto something for support, like a post, a door, a wall, whatever you might need, from here, you're going to keep those ribs down and then turn this leg out to the side and keep tension through this glute, but you'll also feel it through the supporting leg as well. You'll hold this position for about 1 minute on each side. How I do this is from this position here, I just try and relax everything through my upper body and see what feels the most relaxed while maintaining tension through the glutes. So you kind of have to think about this. You have a minute on each side to think about this and get into the right position. Again, not much tension is needed, just enough to get tension through the glutes while trying to make sure our low back is as relaxed as possible, but might be a little bit more difficult on this exercise, so use support as is needed. The next exercise we have, number 7, is going to be a squat rocker. So for this one, band again is in the same exact spot. We're going to be in about a quarter squat position. And then from here, I'm treating my whole body as a statue, except I have a hinge at each ankle joint. So everything else needs to be as still as possible. This band needs to not change tension, so not get looser or tighter as I go through this motion. And the only hinge in my body is going to be the ankle joint. So I'm trying to just rotate at that ankle, staying in the air for maybe a second on each side, maintaining tension through that band, trying not to move any other joint except that ankle joint. Cool, so you'll do this continuously for 1 minute. Beauty, so next exercise, I believe number 8. Number 8 is going to be a cross under lunge hold. So how that will look from the side view is I'm just going to cross under with my opposite leg, coil underneath. I might not get too far across. I'm trying to rotate my hip towards this knee and this knee towards maybe this ankle, drop down and get tension through this glute, keep my ribs down, and try and hold this position with 80-ish% of my weight on my front foot, maybe 20 on my back foot. Again, relaxing my upper body. I've found that coiling into this position kind of helps the low back relax a little bit more. This is one of those exercises where you might have a little bit more tension through the low back. So if you need to use support, that's totally fine. But from the front view, it'll look like this, cross under, and then coil, almost as if you're treating your foot as like a screw that's screwing into the ground. Tension through this glute because it's stretching, and you're just holding this position for 1 minute on each side. And then again, from the side view, it'll look like this. So cross under, coil into the ground, stretch through this glute, and just hold this position for 1 minute while trying to make sure the low back is as relaxed as possible, using support if needed. All right, so exercise 9 is going to be a reverse lunge to a step and then come up to hip flexion. So reverse lunge right here, ribs stay down. I'm going to come up by squeezing this glute, boom, and then I'm going to take a step by squeezing the glute with my opposite leg to come forward, and then from here I'm going to go up into hip flexion within that same motion, which is where my knee and toes are pulled up. Cool. This whole time, we're trying to keep those ribs down so that we don't do any of these movements by arching our low back. So let me show you a bad one real quick, all right? Reverse lunge, arching the low back, stepping by pulling with the low back by pushing that belly button forward, and then pulling by arching our low back to get into this position which should be hip flexion as opposed to low back extension. Cool? Okay, so now let me show you a good one. A good one should look like this, where my ribs stay down to protect my low back and make sure that all movement is going to come from my hips and glutes. Ribs down, step back, come up by squeezing my left glute, come forward and up by squeezing my right glute, keeping my ribs down where my knee and toe are up. Then I step back into that reverse lunge. Again, ribs are down, left glute, right glute, back. So from this angle, going forward, it'll look like this. Step back in reverse lunge, squeeze your left glute to bring this leg forward, squeeze your right glute to bring this knee and toe up, back, left glute, right glute, back, left glute, right glute, back. Cool, so make sure you focus on that core position. You'll know because you'll probably have pain when you're using that low back, so just make sure you draw attention to that. All of these need to be as good of reps as possible. We'll do these continuously for 1 minute, and then you switch legs. So on the opposite side, step back with my left leg, right glute, boom, left glute, boom, back, right glute, left glute, back. From the side, you on the opposite leg, back, right glute, left glute, back, right glute, left glute, back. Cool, so all the movement forward and back comes because we are pushing our hip forward, not because we're arching with our low back or pulling with our low back. This is honestly a great movement to practice even when you're just walking around daily. When you're walking around daily, sometimes I'll even think about this. Sounds corny, sounds unnecessary, maybe it is, but I'll just think about keeping my ribs down and squeezing with that glute to kind of like walk forward. It's just a great way to add a couple more reps and pattern your body to use your hips for everything that we do. Use your glutes when we usually use our low back, especially when we're down on our phone. Usually we're just kind of like walking around like this, right? This is all from my low back, just arching. I'm in a terrible position, or I'm looking down as I walk. Try and, if you can, stay nice and tall when you walk, keep those ribs down, and walk with your hips. Cool, it may like feel goofy for now, but eventually like it'll just be a normal walking gait, and that's just how you're going to move, which will be way more efficient and reinforce much better patterns. All right, exercise 10. Exercise 10 is the last one of this glute iso series of 1 minute exercises. This will be a cross under lunge while keeping the ribs down, stepping up to an A position, squeezing both glutes, pushing the hips forward while keeping the ribs down, and then transferring the weight onto this leg where it's just this right glute, and I bring this leg back up into hip flexion here. Again, cross under lunge, ribs down, A position, hip flexion, boom, boom. Left glute to both, squeeze, right glute, knee up, toe up. Then both back into this A position, cross under, push with this glute until both are forward, and then right glute to bring the knee up and toe up. From the side view, it'll look like this. Cross under, A, hip flexion, back. Right glute to both, left glute to hip flexion while keeping the ribs down, back to A, back to cross under. So just perform this continuously for 1 minute on each side. All right, so those are the 10 exercises for the glute iso series. Make sure that you try and pay attention and focus while you're doing all these. Each rep matters. This series is meant to repattern how we use our body so that we stop using our low back for everything. But if we do these exercises poorly and we reinforce the same exact positions that we want to get away from, we're not fixing anything. Again, the low back is not usually the problem in a low back injury. It's something below that's not doing its job, or something above, i.e. the core, that's not doing its job. So pay attention to the core, pay attention to the hips, try and get the low back to relax, and let's develop everything to protect the low back. The next 2 exercises are going to be stretches. All right, so exercise 11 is going to be a stretch, so will 12. For this, I'm going to be in this half kneeling position. I'm going to keep my ribs down, and I'm going to squeeze my back glute to push this hip forward and stretch this hip flexor. The goal is to loosen up these hip flexors. So I already feel this stretch. If you want a deeper stretch or need more of an intense stretch, try and push that hip forward by keeping those ribs down and squeezing this back glute. One other option, and you can do this on a couch, it's actually called couch stretch, is just elevate this back foot onto a surface like a couch, a chair, whatever you have. This will put you into a pre-stretch, and then the same rules apply. Ribs down, squeeze this back glute, and stretch through that hip flexor, and you should feel it probably through the quad as well. Do this for about 30 seconds to a minute on each side. If you really like this and it feels amazing, do it a couple times. You won't really overdo it with something like this. All right, and so exercise 12 is just going to be a hamstring stretch. I'm going to use this bench. You could use a couch or whatever you have at your disposal, but I'm going to lift my leg up, put my heel down, keep my leg relatively straight with a slight bend in my knee, and then I'm going to push my heel down slightly to get some tension through my hamstring, and then push my hips back to stretch more of my hamstring towards the top of my hip. Keep those ribs down, protect that, and just hold this stretch and try and ease into a little bit deeper of a stretch, even if it's on like every exhale. So what I'll do is take a big breath in and then try and relax on the way out and use that breath to just drop me into a little bit deeper of a stretch. Hold this new position, take another breath in, and exhale into a little bit deeper of a stretch. Do this for about 30 seconds to a minute on each side. Sometimes I'll do these by counting my breaths, and I'll do 5 to 10 breaths on each side. 5 to 10 slow breaths where I exhale into a little bit deeper of a stretch and then switch legs. If you want to do this multiple times on each side because it feels good, awesome, definitely do it. You won't overdo it with this either. All right, and then this last exercise is more of a bonus exercise. Really all we're doing is decompressing the back. Right after an injury, it might be something that feels awesome, or it might just be something that we're not ready for yet. So as needed, if this is tolerable, throw it in your routine. But all I'm going to do is grab this pull-up bar, walk my feet forward so that my lower back is pushed back and I'm not arching my lower back. And from this position where again my ribs are down, I'm just going to try and drop my body weight straight down to the ground as if something's pulling my hips down, and try and open up that lower back and let the lumbar spine, let all those vertebrae kind of separate. So again, grab this pull-up bar, step those feet forward just a little bit and drop that body weight down. Try and relax everything except the hands that are holding onto this bar. From the side view, it would look something kind of like this, just so that you can see the low back position. I'll grab onto this bar, walk forward just a little bit, keep my ribs down, and let my body weight drop to open up space in between my lower back vertebrae. You could do this as tolerable or as long as you can kind of hold onto the bar, typically 30 seconds to a minute. If you want to do it in like 10-second intervals, 15-second intervals, whatever you need, that's fine. One last thing, when you get out of this position, just be very careful, slowly ease your weight back onto your body, as your body probably has to get used to having space in between there, and your body might be guarding it just a little bit. So see if that works, see if it helps, see if you get any relief. If not, we can save that for a little bit further down the line, just to make sure that we're doing a good job of decompressing the lower back.